Your point isn't consistent, love. Listen again to the first few sentences you said. It's giving I'm kissing up to women of color to differentiate myself from other white girls, which in itself is problematic. Let's talk about it. I said marginalized women of color, talk about systems like white supremacy and misogyny far younger and earlier, have had to operate under these systems and be aware of these systems more so than white women. And sometimes white women don't even have these conversations. A lot of white women don't have these conversations, which is where the term white woman feminism comes from. I'm biracial, which means I'm white presenting. I'm indigenous. And I say that to say the most dangerous place for a white woman to be is in relationship with a man. The most dangerous person to an indigenous woman is a random man. That's why we have something called the Highway of Tears in Canada, as well as missing and murdered Indigenous women. Because when Indigenous women go missing, and we say women as if they aren't also children, when they go missing, who doesn't look for them? The police. And this is why if you ever watch media that is by Shonda Rhimes, anyone who is a black woman creating media where they have young black children, there's conversations taking place of the parents talking to the kids about how to handle situations with police. Those are not conversations you're having to have with white children. And if you are having those conversations, they're different because there's no racial undertone in that conversation. Maybe your kid does something stupid, but they're not getting racially profiled as children and teenagers. And when we talk about these systems, which is white supremacy as well as patriarchy, the difference between Canada and the United States is a little bit different because we haven't been a country as long. But our first Prime Minister, John A. Macdonald, was quoted as saying not wanting to give the rights to vote to Indians, referred to as Indians in all government texts, because it would take away from the rights of white men, specifically white. We have something called the Indian Act in Canada, which I still fall under because, yes, I'm a status Indigenous, that still affects Indigenous people today and gave Indigenous people the right to vote after white women. Because by definition, legally in Canada, the definition of what a person was considered under our Constitution was anyone who wasn't an Indian. So if you understand intersectional feminism, which means that white men are at the top of the hierarchy, men of color are going to be marginalized for being of color, but they're not going to be marginalized for being men. White women are marginalized for being women, but not marginalized for being white. Women of color are marginalized for being of color as well as being women, which is why women of color have to have very different conversations from a very young age. Because purity culture, when we talk about purity culture, what is the caricature that is purity culture? It's a blonde, blue-eyed white girl in a little pretty white dress. But black women are hypersexualized from a much younger age. And we can simply look to history as to why. Because they were viewed as less than. They, as well as Indigenous women, were viewed as subhuman. So my point is actually very consistent. You just don't understand it.